What makes a good critique or a good analysis? It's about whether its reasoning is sound, its examples relevant and clear. Clarity, structure, evidence, fairness, these are all important to critique and analysis. And Egoraptor makes it very clear at the start of the video that what he's trying to do is critical analysis.
Hey, what are you doing over there?
I'm just writing my preemptive counter-argument about how you're wrong about my favorite game of all time and the best game ever.
Oh, okay. Well, don't you think that's a little, closed-minded? I mean, I get you probably liked this game as a kid, but isn't it time we looked at it critically and made a fair analysis of how...
No!
Okay.
So with that, I shall be evaluating it accordingly. Much like the subject of my last video, New Frame Plus, these guys aren't just making casual videos that's just their opinion, bro. They're trying to be in-depth and make well-argued statements. You don't get a pass for making lazy, unsupported claims. So, moving on.
Ask anybody about Zelda. Anyone can tell you what makes a Zelda game, and what a game needs to be a Zelda game. But is that description you'll get really what describes a Zelda game at its core? Is it possible that following this formula might actually be missing the entire point of what makes Zelda awesome, or even what makes a sequel awesome?
Okay, so we have our thesis. These claims aren't just bold, they're provocative and confrontational, which is fine. Challenging popular opinions and calling out supposed ignorance will always have that effect. What matters, though, is whether Egoraptor lays the groundwork to support such a strong claim. Since his argument hinges on a discrepancy between the core of the series and the formula that people, including the developers, mistake for it, he needs to do several things. Clearly define what the core is, articulate the formula he opposes, and connect these ideas to how they unfold in Ocarina of Time and later Zelda games. Without these specifics, without this groundwork, the argument will lose clarity and become more unfounded and baseless.
In Zelda, you were an adventurer, and, well, seriously, that much wasn't even explained. You were just a green dude. Walk to a cave. Old dude goes, hey, take this. You're like, okay, it's a sword. You swing it at monsters that shoot rocks and shit at you, and you have a great time killing them. You figure if there's a cave I get a sword in, there must be other caves to get other shit in, right? Maybe other swords? I don't know. This world's neat. Well, that's Zelda. But is that description you'll get really what describes a Zelda game at its core?
Now, I didn't replay that clip to be a smartass. The point is, Egoraptor's description begs the same question that he started the video with. Is that really Zelda? This is where we're already having problems. The reason Egoraptor needed to first define what the core is, rather than jumping directly into his own interpretation of Zelda's core, is that the premise of this video places that concept into doubt. If most people misunderstand the core of Zelda, then what exactly is a core? What does that even mean? How do you determine what the core of any game is? Without a definition, we're left guessing. Even if people were to disagree with his definition, we would at least be able to understand where he's coming from. Now let's replay that clip where he explains what Zelda is.
In Zelda, you were an adventurer, and, well, seriously, that much wasn't even explained. You were just a green dude. Walk to a cave. Old dude goes, hey, take this. You're like, okay, it's a sword. You swing it at monsters that shoot rocks and shit at you, and you have a great time killing them. You figure if there's a cave I get a sword in, there must be other caves to get other shit in, right? Maybe other swords? I don't know. This world's neat. Well, that's Zelda.
Did you get that? Isn't it so clear? Zelda's about fighting monsters and getting things in caves. Nothing more to it than that, right? Did you come away with a more clear understanding of what the core is? Obviously not, because Egoraptor didn't really explain anything in a substantive way. Rather than be direct and concise, he tells a story and hopes you'll fill in the blanks for him. So the problems are not only that Egoraptor doesn't define what a core is for a game, but that his own interpretation of Zelda's core is vague in its own right, and both are foundational to his entire argument. And from here, we move on to talking about Link to the Past.
It was like the definitive Zelda, right? It felt like the first Zelda, but there was so much more. Bigger world, more things going on, it was nuts! My 8-year-old mind couldn't take it. Was I 8? I don't remember. But still, it changed a lot of things. This guy, Link, was given a name and a purpose.
Alright, now I'm gonna have to stop him here because this is where Egoraptor gets things factually wrong. Link wasn't given a name in Link to the Past. For one, how can that be the case when the second game is named after him? And for two, it's literally on the start screen of the first game. There's his name, and he's given a purpose. Somehow he was able to bring up the manual for Link to the Past, but not do the same for the first Zelda. And these aren't just minor errors either, but we'll get to that later.
Rescue the princess! Save Hyrule! You have an uncle. I don't know what his name is. He dies. In Link to the Past, you start out in a house. You're forced to head up, sneak into a castle, fight some guards, rescue a princess, and bring her through an underground tunnel to some church or whatever, so you can finally go out, have your world to enjoy. Okay, cool. But okay, you want me to talk to some old lady? Okay, then what? Oh, find some kid who knows about where some old dude is? Okay, so here's the old dude. Okay, so go into this temple. Okay, beat the temple. Okay, listen. I'm not your fucking servant. Why do you give me this world to explore and have a good time in, and then you tell me to do this super specific thing?
By definition, games have goals. That's how you win. Ego phrases this question like there's some kind of internal contradiction, but there's nothing about having a world in a game that precludes them from having you do things in them in order to win. Having a world and having goals are not mutually exclusive. What is this prescriptive design ideology that if you have a world for players to explore, you're not allowed to tell them to do things in it? Where did that design dogma come from?
You don't throw a 6-year-old into a sandbox.
Zelda is not a sandbox. What's more revealing here is Egoraptor's own expectations. Why is he so caught off guard by this unless he had this myopic view of games? I also want to point out his use of the word servant, as it's a very telling choice of words. This is another one that we'll have to come back to later.
I mean, exploration still exists in Link to the Past, and God knows it's required to beat it. But if a game is telling you to do specific things with marks on a map and a sequence of which things to do and specific instructions, you're not discovering a world. You're being taken on a tour. You're no longer a pioneer adventurer, you're a guest at Disneyland. Don't you think that's a little, closed-minded?
Faulty analogies like this stem from false dichotomies. It's what happens when someone's thinking is constrained to the extremes. You have marks on a map, therefore you're on a tour at Disneyland. There's nothing in between. It's reducing all nuance and complexity down to an all-or-nothing binary. Egoraptor also conflates exploration with discovery in a way that reveals a narrow and inaccurate understanding of both. Exploration and discovery are abstract terms. Abstract meaning they are not specific or tangible objects or actions, but broad concepts. To explore means to investigate, to search into, or travel. To discover is to encounter, perceive, or realize something previously unknown or unrecognized, whether through effort, chance, or insight. It is the moment of transition from unaware to aware. This not only means that guidance and discovery aren't mutually exclusive, but that discovery doesn't require exploration either. As Egoraptor concedes, exploration still exists in Link to the Past. Oh, but you're just not discovering a world. But what the hell does that even mean? You explore to discover things in the world. But this is what happens when you lack clear language and structure. You stop making any sense. The way a friend put it, Egoraptor has a narrow definition of exploring, walking around to places driven by curiosity, which is basically just randomness. Places no one has been to or no one tells you they've already been to. This kind of exploration is less about personal understanding and discovery, but a more egotistical version about staking claims and doing things before others. This is indicative of his use of the word pioneer. Link is not a pioneer. He's part of an already inhabited world with people who've lived in it long before Link came around. Worlds with pre-existing structures and histories. These are not uncharted, untouched worlds. Egoraptor simply doesn't want to be told what to do by any authority, which is more about a personal sense of dominance and rebellion than engaging meaningfully with the world. And this goes back to his very telling use of the word servant from earlier. He's fine to have his own preferences, but isn't this supposed to be a fair and critical analysis?
The whole game, it feels a bit more processed. It feels a bit more planned. You have a mission, and the mission is laid out for you, and that kind of thing is fine. I mean, I go to Disneyland like 6 times a year. But Zelda, from its roots, it's not the kind of game that holds your hand. There's no explanation or even really like a goal, but there's adversity everywhere, and you can approach it anytime you want, whether you're prepared or not. You run the real risk of facing off against something that will kill you in a fucking second. It's fucking awesome!
Alright, so let's break this down. He goes from talking about the supposed lack of explanation in the first Zelda, to how you can approach adversity whenever you want, which relates to player choice, and then the fact that there exists enemies that can kill you, like any other video game. Okay, so that last one isn't worth going over. First of all, you can't do any dungeon in Zelda in any order that you want. Only the first 3 dungeons you can do in any order you want. Many dungeons you can't complete or find without items or encountering NPCs that tell you how to get to them. You can't get into level 4 without the raft from level 3. Multiple dungeons after level 4 you can't even finish without getting the step ladder in it. The intended path to get to level 5 is from talking to the old man in level 4, who then tells you to go into the waterfall to where you meet an old man that tells you how to get through the Lost Hills. You can't reach level 6 without the stepladder or paying the old lady who gives you directions for how to get through the Lost Woods. Oh no, directions. Specific directions. In a sequence of which to do things. I guess the first Zelda is Disneyland now. In any case, the point is that no, you cannot approach the dungeons anytime you want. That is wrong. Unless that's not what Egoraptor means because he's being unclear again about what adversity you're exactly approaching anytime you want. Maybe he's just referring to the fact that there exists enemies in the overworld to which there's not really much of a point there. Every Zelda has that. The second issue here is much, much more severe because it undermines his entire argument. Remember when I pointed out earlier how he was factually incorrect about Link having a name and a purpose? That isn't just a minor factual error, because he's talking about the design philosophy of the game, about what Zelda is at its roots, at its core. The problem is that it absolutely explains things and gives you a goal. It's right on the title screen. Back then, there was more of an expectation for players to read the manual to know how to play the game. The title screen of the first Zelda game even encourages you to read the manual. The original Zelda also came packaged with a map that was marked and even labeled what number the dungeons were. I guess that makes it Disneyland again. How can you discover a world if you have a map that's marked? A game that has a title screen that tells you to read the manual is not indicative of a design philosophy that it wants to keep you in the dark and explain nothing, to explain so little that it doesn't even give you a goal or the main character a name. That is not Zelda at its roots. Even though Egoraptor hasn't defined what a core of a game is, his interpretation of that core here is objectively wrong.
But if you look at A Link to the Past and The Legend of Zelda from a surface level, they seem the same. There's a bunch of dungeons you get items for. Bombs, triangles, boomerangs, oh my! With bosses and a final fight with a giant pigman, there's a big world with caves and bushes. But it's not the same. There's a shift in soul, a difference in how you perceive and experience the world. Is it better? Is it worse? I don't fucking know. But it's not the same!
What Egoraptor considers to be surface level of a game is confusing in its own right. A lot of what he listed, the dungeons, the items, a big world with caves and bushes, that's all part of the gameplay of the game. So gameplay is surface level now? Just moments earlier, Egoraptor was saying this.
Swinging at monsters that shoot rocks and shit at you and you have a great time killing them. You figure if there's a cave I get a sword in, there must be other caves to get other shit in, right?
And he was using that to describe the core. But now, moments later, he says this.
There's a big world with caves and bushes.
And that very same world with caves and bushes is now surface level. This is why clear language and clear terms is important. You avoid making contradictory statements like this, which is critical to the entire argument. It is true that any little difference can make all the difference in the experience of playing games. For example, the map in the first Zelda still leaves the corners of the map blank, and the remaining half of the dungeons aren't marked. What's lame is that Egoraptor basically gives up and moves on. And while normally it is admirable to just admit when you don't know something, it's your job when doing a critique or analysis to figure out what you think after you make accurate comparisons. To improve the critique, Egoraptor needed to do his research by listing out the details of both games in a non-biased way, grouping them by what they share so that he could then make more objective comparisons about whatever topic or category he needed, such as graphics, controls, mechanics, enemy design, level design, etc., to be able to say that one Zelda features more of X element than another Zelda game. It's evident that Egoraptor has not done this work in examining the Zelda games, given he has made major factual errors. Zelda is not a sandbox. The first Zelda does not allow you to do dungeons in any order. The first Zelda definitely gives Link a name and a purpose, a goal. Egoraptor isn't just wrong. He's wrong because he doesn't have a good method for analyzing games. When you're able to look at the manual to support your claim for one game, but not do the same for the other, it shows an uneven and unbalanced approach when making comparisons. Since Egoraptor changes topic to Ocarina of Time, let's recap the issue so far. Egoraptor has failed to lay out the groundwork to support his thesis. We have no clear idea for what a core is, no clear idea what the core of Zelda specifically is. Aspects of his interpretation of that core are straight up wrong, and his interpretation for what the surface level is unclear and at odds with his own prior statements. At this point, whatever the supposed core or the supposed formula of Zelda is completely arbitrary and not based on any objective criteria. It's a complete mess. This lack of structure and clear language is what leads to the disastrous results that we'll see later in the video.